let the journey begin here with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. We've got some definitions. Now, I don't want to camp out here too long on definitions, but there's a couple things I want to make sure that we understand. So we've got the definition of a consumer report. So think of a credit report that you order from one of the big three credit reporting agencies, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, or maybe it's one of your local credit bureaus that ultimately you're purchasing it from, but they still get it from one of those three big bureaus. Those are consumer reports. And that's what's going to be defined on page number 1, Roman numeral 1, underneath letter A1 in the consumer report. Now, within that set of paragraphs underneath letter A, there's something important that I want to draw your attention to make sure we get off on the right foot here today. Underneath letter A, there's a series of 3 paragraphs. I want you to drop down to the 3rd paragraph. There's an important line in there that I want to draw your attention to. So pick up your pen, your highlighter, whatever. I want you to underline or highlight this. In the 2nd line, it's trying to describe what is a consumer report and when is a consumer report a consumer report. And an important distinction is this. Okay, it's what it says in the 2nd line in that 3rd paragraph underneath A1, small letter A, is this. A report by a CRA stands for Consumer Reporting Agency, is a consumer report even if it's used for commercial purposes. So let's just stop there for a minute. There's a misconception out there that if I order a consumer report in connection with a business transaction, okay, a commercial transaction, however you want to describe it, that even though it's labeled a consumer report, the consumer to which that report corresponds is not a consumer for that transaction. Okay, well, I get that for things like Reg Z, the Truth in Lending Act, and do disclosures like you would for consumer purpose transactions. The misconception is this: it's still a consumer report. Okay, and that consumer still has rights. You still have responsibilities and requirements that you have to abide by, because it doesn't cease to be a consumer report just because it's commercial loan. Now, there's going to be some exclusions. For example, if you are pulling somebody's credit report in connection with a commercial transaction, and they're only going to be a guarantor or a co-signer, it's still a consumer report, but there's certain things you don't necessarily have to do. Like under Regulation B, they're not owed an adverse action notice. And you're going to learn a little bit later today, they're also not owed an adverse action notice on the Fair Credit Reporting Act side. Now, most of you combine those into one notifications anyway, but co-signers and guarantors are not deemed to be applicants for those notification requirements. But it's still a consumer report. For example, if you pull a report with a score and you make the loan, they're still owed the credit score disclosure. It's not a consumer versus commercial thing. It's if you have a consumer report and it's not otherwise excluded, like I just told you about adverse action notices, hey, then you have to comply fully with the requirements of the rule. And we'll get into that stuff a little bit later on here, but that's an important distinction right out of the gate, that just because it's a commercial transaction doesn't mean the report ceases to be a consumer report, and the consumer doesn't cease to have rights, and you don't cease to have responsibilities just because it's a commercial transaction. So important distinction there.